Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Perfectly Homeless podcast.
Yeah, thanks for joining us again.
We're continuing with State Homeless Score Project.
And today is a really important one.
Right, because, the treatment of homelessness varies wildly state by state. And today, you are listening to us build a scorecard for New York.
Exactly. We're building it from the ground up.
And just to emphasize for you listening, the score is going to evolve dynamically during the episode. Like, it won't be fully revealed until the very end.
Let's start here.
Okay, so give us the macro picture of New York.
Well, looking at the macro picture, the scale is just massive. As of 2026, there are nearly 100,000 people, 98,671 to be exact, sleeping in NYC shelters every single night.
Which is just staggering.
Right. But the true scope is actually closer to 350,000 when you factor in, the hidden homeless, people living in vehicles or doubled up in other people's homes.
Yeah, and we really have to highlight the systemic pattern here because this isn't just like some pandemic hangover anymore.
No, not at all.
The system has been stretched to its absolute breaking point by compounding factors. You've got expiring eviction protections, a massive influx of over 200,000 asylum seekers since 2022, and, well, stagnant wages.
Yeah, wages are a huge part of it, which naturally brings us to Category 1, housing affordability.
Right.
And here we really have to outline the crushing economic reality.
Right.
Median rent in NYC surpassed $3,500 in 2025, and Manhattan one-bedrooms are well over $4,000.
It's just wild to even think about.
Yeah, and over 50% of NYC residents are rent-burdened, meaning they spend more than 30% of their income on housing. In 2025 alone, there were 114,832 eviction filings.
I really want to push back on the traditional stereotype of poverty here, though, and introduce the working homeless.
Okay. Yeah.
Because if you look at essential workers, delivery drivers, retail workers, security guards, they're making maybe $15 to $25 an hour, which is around $41,000 a year. And they're just mathematically priced out. After taxes, their entire monthly take-home pay wouldn't even cover an average rent check.
Yeah, it's basically impossible. And this shifts the score downward, noting that affordability is really the primary engine driving people into the streets.
So when people are priced out of the housing market like that, they are forced to seek emergency options, which brings you to the state's unique safety net.
Right, Category 2, shelter access. And we really have to explain the historical context that makes New York so distinct here.
The legal mandate, right?
Exactly. The 1979 Callahan v. Carey lawsuit resulted in a unique, legally mandated right to shelter. Because of this, NY actually shelters roughly 97% of its homeless population.
Which is a stark contrast to places on the West Coast, like Los Angeles.
Yeah, a totally different approach.
But let's look at the lived reality for a second because the system is just completely overwhelmed. In 2025, over 194,000 unique individuals utilized the DHS shelter system.
That's a massive volume of people to process.
Yeah, and the city had to convert over 122 hotels, including the historic Roosevelt Hotel, just to handle the influx of asylum seekers.
But there's a real tension between the policy and the actual reality on the ground.
How so?
Well, while the right to a bed exists, the actual conditions of those congregate shelters are often cited by advocates as, dehumanizing, overcrowded, and unsafe, which causes many to just refuse entry.
Even so, I think we have to acknowledge that this raises the overall picture. Providing a physical roof for 97% of the population is a monumental systemic achievement, despite the immense operational flaws.
That's totally fair. But because of these strict, overcrowded shelter conditions, many individuals still choose to avoid them entirely.
Which means they stay on the streets.
Right, leading directly to how the state polices those who remain outside, which is Category 3, criminalization and enforcement.
And the enforcement tactics out there are aggressive. From January 2024 to June 2025, there were 46,113 NYPD-aided removals of homeless individuals.
Yeah, and to give systemic context to those numbers, the state and city really doubled down on quality of life enforcement and sweeps.
Just constantly moving people around.
It's exactly. Out of 4,142 encampment sweeps involving over 6,000 people, only 263 individuals actually entered a shelter on the day of their removal.
Wow, that's an incredibly low placement rate.
And furthermore, the state expanded involuntary hospitalizations, resulting in 14,356 transports. And often, these just result in people being released back to the street a few hours later.
So they aren't actually resolving the core issue at all.
No, so this lowers the overall picture, reflecting a policy focused on moving people out of public sight rather than resolving their actual housing status.
Okay, well, we're about a third of the way through, which means it's time to pause and present our preliminary score overlay for you listening.
Right.
We are calling this the draft score.
And I want to emphasize strongly to you that this is not the final score.
Not at all.
The upcoming categories, especially regarding how people survive outside traditional systems, may significantly change the final result.
Right, because if the shelters are full and the sidewalks are constantly being swept, people naturally seek the security of a locked door, even if it happens to have wheels.
Exactly. Which brings us to Category 4, vehicle dwelling friendliness.
Right.
Because there's a hitting crisis of vehicle homelessness spreading across NYC, Long Island, and upstate.
Like people living in vans and stuff.
Yeah, a used van or RV costing maybe $5,000 to $20,000 acts as a last resort to just maintain mobility and keep a job.
But the lived reality of the enforcement against that is intense. NYC parking regulations are notoriously hostile.
Very hostile.
Vehicles over 181 inches in length or 65 inches in height are classified as oversized. And while private lots might charge $15, street parking is heavily restricted by street cleaning, meters, and strict overnight bans.
It makes it almost impossible to park legally.
So what happens when someone earning low wages is hit with repeated $65 to $115 parking tickets and towing fees?
It just creates a relentless cycle of sleep deprivation, fines, and displacement.
With no real way out.
Right, with zero widespread safe parking programs anywhere in the state to offer a legal reprieve.
Which is brutal, and honestly, this lowers the overall picture.
Yeah, and it connects this punitive environment directly to the state's attempt to actually help those on the streets through, social workers rather than police.
Which brings us to Category 5, outreach and social services.
And let's look at the massive financial investment here. The Department of Homeless Services Street Homeless Solutions Division saw their spending triple to $368 million by 2025.
That is a massive budget.
It is. They utilize homestat tracking and the annual HOPE count to estimate the unsheltered population.
But we really have to contrast the spending with the lived reality. The city has tried to lower barriers by opening safe havens and drop-in centers, creating a capacity of about 4,900 beds.
Which is definitely a good step.
Yeah, but the data tracking is heavily criticized. The state knows how many people they engage, but public data completely fails to track how long people stay placed or why they refuse service.
So there's a serious lack of transparent long-term outcomes. And because of that, this shifts the score.
Right. Acknowledging the high financial investment, but the lack of actual outcome data. And really, outreach is only effective if there is an actual destination at the end of the line.
Exactly.
Which brings you to the final category, Category 6, pathways to permanent housing.
Right, and we do need to highlight a major positive here. Subsidized exits from the shelter system actually increased by 82% from 2022 to 2025.
Reaching 17,870 exits, right?
Yes, and that was largely driven by city FAPS vouchers and federal emergency housing vouchers, or EHVs.
But I have to push back on that, just pointing out the fragile foundation of this success.
How so?
Well, the federal EHVs are expiring in 2026, which is threatening a massive return to shelters. Meanwhile, systemic bottlenecks are completely paralyzing the existing infrastructure.
Oh, right, the empty units.
Exactly. NYCHA has nearly 6,000 vacant units sitting empty due to slow repair times, and there are over 4,700 vacant supportive housing units because of a dysfunctional bureaucratic placement system called PAYCT that often just overrides clinician recommendations entirely.
It's maddening.
Yeah.
Well, based on this, the current draft score is ready to be locked in for the final evaluation phase.
All right, let's do the final summary then. To wrap up the major strengths, New York is legally bound to provide a right to shelter, keeping a massive percentage of vulnerable people from dying of exposure.
That's arguably its biggest and most important strength.
And recent years showed strong capabilities in subsidizing housing exits when federal funds were available.
Right. But summarizing the major weaknesses, you have astronomical housing costs combined with punitive street sweeps and strict vehicle criminalization, creating this revolving door of displacement.
Absolutely.
Furthermore, bureaucratic delays are keeping thousands of much-needed permanent units completely empty.
So let's assign the exact grades for these categories.
Yeah.
Housing affordability grade, F.
Yeah, undoubtedly.
Shelter access grade, B.
Agreed.
Criminalization and enforcement grade, D.
Definitely a D.
Vehicle dwelling friendliness grade, F.
Yeah, it's just too hostile out there.
Outreach and social services grade,
Hmm.
C. And pathways to permanent housing grade, C.
So when you put it all together and calculate the metrics, the final perfectly homeless state score is a 48 out of 100.
Wow, a 48.
Yeah. And New York receives this score because its immense financial investments and unique legal mandates to provide shelter are fundamentally undermined.
Undermined by the housing market, right.
Exactly. Undermined by a market that produces zero affordable housing and a law enforcement strategy that actively penalizes those who fall through the cracks.
That's the perfectly homeless state score for New York.
It's a really tough reality to look at.
Thank you for taking the time to listen. If you find this series interesting, please let us know in the comments. Oh, don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time, stay safe and informed and have a pleasant day.